Good morning to everybody. I am Alessandra Venturini, the holder of the Chair Jean Monnet European Migration Studies. I'm very glad today to open the third conference of the Mineu seminar. Mineu stands for Driver of Migration in European Neighborhood. And today we are very happy and glad to welcome Sona Kalantaryan, who is working at the Knowledge Center of Migration and Demography of the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in ISPRA. He was before at the Migration Policy Center University in Florence, but in the past she did the PhD and the master's studies in Torino, so she's part of the audience in the class. She is an expert on migration field in many fields of migration, and I don't want to waste more time with the introduction. You find some references in the booklet, and I will give to her the flow for this very interesting subject. She has worked on many fields, integration, migration choice, and so on, and now she's presented this granary in flame, which is a very updated subject. So, Sona, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Alessandra, for inviting me to this series of seminar, and I'm very happy to contribute to share our findings with the audience. I would like to ask you if you see the presentation.
Yes.
Let me go to the full screen, perhaps. Okay, do you see it full screen, perhaps? No, now. Yeah, it should be. Yes. Can they see or no?
Yes, they see.
Okay, perfect. So I would like, first of all, to highlight that I'm coming from the European Commission, but in the past, I benefited a lot from the opportunity that was given to me as a foreign student to study both for my master program and for the PhD at the University of Turin, and I'm always happy to pay back, to share back the knowledge and I gained in the further steps after graduation. So I would like, first of all, to present the context and of the institution that I work in, because it would be important to understand also where the study comes from. I work at the European Commission Knowledge Center on Migration and Demography, which has been established in 2016. Migration is the top of political agenda, and we know that it is also on the very center of public debate. And that explains the need to underpin the policy decisions in this area with a sound evidence. In the 2015-16 crisis of migration, the European Commission decided to establish a specialized knowledge center on migration, and then we accommodated also the demography expertise that serves all the policy DGs of the European Commission. It's true that we are operated by the Joint Research Center of Migration, which is one of the biggest office of it is actually hosted by Italy in the province of Varese. But it is important to understand that it is a horizontal entity. Actually, we work under the supervision guidance of various policy DGs that are External Action Service, that can be told that it's a Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the European Union, then INTPA, that is in charge of cooperation, NEAR, that is the eastern countries, that actually this series of seminars is focused on geographically, then Regio, Eurostat, ECHO, that is in charge of humanitarian responses, HOME, which is the main policy DGs in charge of the Home Affairs and Migration, Research, DG in charge of research and innovation, and the Secretary General. To say this is we are guided by the priorities by all these policy DGs, and we also create a unique opportunity for all the policymakers that coming from all these different fields. Believe me, they don't have many opportunities to sit together at the same table, but KCMD, the Knowledge Center, is an opportunity for them to at least 2-3 times per year to sit together and to speak on the common challenges and knowledge gaps that are in the related to migration and demography. So we both manage and synthesize the existing knowledge, because sometimes it's very difficult to navigate in the growing body of literature. We identify the knowledge gaps and try to fill them with the new analysis. But also, in addition to using the traditional data, I don't know, maybe some of you have been in the lecture the other day I provided on Eurostat data. We are also trying to look at the potential of traditional, non-traditional data. Overall, that is coming from social media, Facebook, Twitter, and all that you have in your phone under your hand. So the current priorities are crossing across the priorities of the knowledge center itself, and we look both the external dimension of migration, and this study is conducted actually within that part of the wing, by that wing of the knowledge center on migration and demography, but also we look at demography and democracy. We know that the European continent is aging, and this, in addition to the twin transition, which is the digital and green, brings another type of challenge and transition that is related to changing demography of the continent. So we have also a set of tools provided by the European policymakers that facilitate their access to data, because we know that the data on migration is available, but it's very much scattered across those who produce this data. Not easy to have a kind of concise set of information without putting much time into it. So this is also what we try to do with our tools. Now about today's piece of research I'm going to present. In general, we know that Africa is an important continent for us when we look at migration, and it's not random that much of our research output is related to migration, that is within Africa or coming from Africa, or this is an important partner of when we deal with migration management, and this will stay like that also in the future. So it's not random that one of our first products were related to developing migration profiles, and then we looked at different angles of migration. For example, trying to understand in the future how many more migrants would come to Europe to underpin also the EU-AU partnership. We looked also through the lenses of the changing climate conditions, both in Europe and Africa, and how it will affect in the future. Alessandra, can you confirm that they see me?
Yes, yes, they see. I will confirm.
Okay. So then also, of course, we look, for example, on remittances, which are the money that are sent by migrants to their families, those that they left in the country of origin. And we also try to understand their importance, the situation that was created by COVID-19 pandemic. And then we look, for example, at the perspective of youth in African countries. So it's not only in terms of migration, but also towards the attitudes, about aspiration, about the young individuals that are the potential migrants. So now about this particular study that I'm going to present to you, try to explain how it came and how the policymakers and research nexus is working. Actually, we have, as I told, a plan that is discussed by various policy leaders, but we have also ad hoc requests, things that we couldn't anticipate. For example, since the beginning of the war, many requests changed that were coming to us. One of the requests was this one, that was generated by the External Action Service, which was very much concerned by the potential inflow of migrants coming from the African continent. And they requested us, and this was supported by other policy DGs, to conduct a study to look at the relationship between food insecurity and migration. So the study is larger, of course, but I would like to guide you through the main findings and the methodology we used to look at these two phenomena: the migration intention, the migration action, and food insecurity. Okay, since the beginning in February last year, the Russian war in Ukraine has threatened to have a dramatic impact on the global food insecurity. And this is not random because both Ukraine and Russia are important exporters of crucial commodities such as wheat, sunflower, and Russia is also one of the biggest exporters of agricultural fertilizers worldwide. So much of Ukrainian agriculture land in 2022 remained either unharvested or the collected crop was challenged to be arriving to the destination. And we know that much of Africa relies on the crop, on the wheat that is coming from Russia and from Ukraine. We know that later there was a wheat deal between facilitated by Turkey that to some extent relaxed the situation, but at the very beginning the concerns were very strong. And just to anticipate that even that deal does not completely resolve the situation because the food insecurity have been there already before, and I will demonstrate it to you. So that we know that already as soon as the war started, the World Bank confirmed that global fertilizer prices has increased also significantly, making many of farmers not to even plant anything because it would be too risky to invest in the fertilizers, and in case they wouldn't be able to have the harvest, that the investment in fertilizers would not be repaid. Also IMF demonstrated that the Africa's economic outlook was hit quite heavily but increase in food. And as I told that many African countries to different extent, I will not discuss it here, but to different extent, for example, Egypt very much depends on the wheat coming from Ukraine and Russia. And overall, this sees of the departures of wheat from Black Sea harbors and also high prices of fertilizers could further harm the own food production in the African continent. So this was followed by very alarming public statement by politicians and representatives of international organizations that were pressing over European Union to provide extra financial resources because the food insecurity would lead higher pressure towards European Union of migration flows. So I will not go much in details because some of these statements were political, some were aimed at having a direct fundraising objectives, but overall everybody was concerned, and this is why we were approached to provide evidence to this. I would like to just spare a couple of words about what we aim by food insecurity and what we aim by food insecurity. These are not exactly the antonyms of each other. They have various definitions, and there has been a huge work also by the Joint Research Center that has a knowledge center on food and nutrition security and providing evidence both to European Union but also to international organizations such as World Food Programme or, for example, Food and Agriculture Organization, hosted actually in Italy, on various aspects of food insecurity. And we already see, even before the war started, there were pockets of extreme food insecurity in African continent and integrated. I mean, I would like to say that here we don't go into very complex and refined methodologies of understanding of these pockets of food insecurity. And those who are interested could go and look at the manuals of integrated food insecurity phase classification, which are based on very kind of detailed methodology and distinguish between acute food security, chronic food insecurity, and acute malnutrition. So these are somebody who would like to make career in FAO, etc. I would like to invite your attention to go and look at it. So we try to look first of all in the literature, and the literature provides quite mixed evidence on relationship between food insecurity and migration. Some claim that the food insecurity does not drive migration because the food insecurity affects the desire and the wish of people to migrate, but actually it doesn't turn into actual journey. Also, for those who intend to migrate, the likelihood of actual preparation to move decreases with the severity of food insecurity. And this is not surprising because most probably people who are affected very harshly by food insecurity have already spent the resources that they could otherwise spend to move, hoping to find a solution in place. So they are constrained financially, so they cannot finance their journey. There is also evidence that is especially coming from
sorry, Sona. Ivan was saying that the weather, the environmental cries, so on, are creating internally displaced people,
Yes,
but not
exactly.
international migrants.
Exactly. So I would come to that. So actually, it is true that food insecurity can be driver of migration, and in some cases, it can be a driver also of international migration if the settlement is very close to the neighbor. But overall, the displacement is happening in proximity. Okay, so if you have a village affected by food insecurity, generated by drought, it is more likely that people will move their stock of animals to the neighboring, and if that neighboring is another country, then you register international migration. But overall, they remain in proximity. Okay, so that especially for food, international organizations provide this evidence that it leads to some kind of displacement, but this is because migration or this internal move is a strategy to cope with food insecurity, and it's only one of the strategies to deal with that. Then the more realistic picture would come like if we look at it not as a single driver of migration, because it's complex. There are multiple and interrelated factors which shape international migration, and it's difficult, if not completely impossible, to distinguish one exact driver of it. And then the food insecurity is difficult to judge whether it was a driver of migration, whether, because it depends on the causes of that food insecurity. Is it something because related to the not the arrival of some food provision, or is it because of drought? Is it something repetitive, so people decided that that area became not apt for agricultural production, hence they are moving somewhere else, looking for opportunities elsewhere? But much actually depends on the not only on food insecurity, but also the causes and the capacity of the countries to deal with food insecurities in places. For example, if there are places affected by drought, but there are capacity of the country to respond in place to the population, most likely this population will not move, or at least would not move in masses. So in our study, we explore, following the request coming from our colleagues from External Action Service, we try to look at the Afrobarometer survey, which provides evidence on different aspects, but it's actually a public opinion survey. It asks numerous questions, among which we were lucky to have in that same survey a question that was related to frequency of going without food, okay, of the household. And the head of household could answer never, just once or twice, several times, many times, always. Okay, these were the distribution of answers that they could give. And also they were asked two questions related to plans and preparation to migrate. They were asked actually how much, if at all, have you considered to move to another country? This is actually the real question that they were asked to the respondents of the survey. The people could ask a little bit, somewhat, a lot, or not at all. And if they were answering positive to this question, they were asked if they are planning actually and preparing to migrate, planning in the next 1 or 2 years, or they are actually planning, like getting visa, buying tickets. Okay. We know this is to mention that migration is not something that actually translates into migration, and there is a big gap between consideration and the actual move, but it gives an idea of who would be the movers in case the possibility would come. Okay. What we see is that food insecurity was a problem in Africa also before 2022. Actually, if we look at the distribution of answers, we see that the number of those that never experienced food insecurity went from 54.8, almost 55, to 48. Okay, so there was an increase of share of people who have been experiencing food insecurity in the past. And also, it is important to mention that much of this food insecurity increase was in the recent period, in the between 2000, let me see, because 2016, 18 to 2019. So this happened over pandemic. The trend was there. We know, we were alarmed by various international organizations that all the effort, all the efforts of the last decade to fight poverty and food insecurity have been kind of nilled by the COVID-19 pandemics and increasing fuel prices and fertilizer prices. Okay, so let's say that we have to keep in mind that food insecurity was not some episode that was related only to war of Russia in Ukraine, but it was there already. So even if we have a peace and ceasefire tomorrow in Russia, or all the wheat depart as it was planned, still we have this problem going on the continent. So we have to look at the more carefully on the food insecurity and migration relationship in any case. Okay, and it is important also to say that much of this increase was in the category of those who were reported experiencing food insecurity. Always, actually, the share of them increased by 31% and many times by 15%. So not only the share of those who experienced the food insecurity increased, but this increase was skewed towards those who have severe food insecurity issue. So actually, I mean, this might be very surprising, and those who don't deal with the issues in African continent, it's also shocking that more than half of the respondents in 21 countries of 34, and here we are dealing with representative sample, which means at macro level we can have a very valid estimate that in 21 out of 34 countries, half of the respondents have gone without food over the last year. Okay, this was the percentage was quite low in Mauritius, in Morocco, Tunisia, Cape Verde, Ghana. These are countries that are relatively developed and are entering in middle income countries, even lower middle income countries. And the situation is very tragic in countries like Malawi, Niger, and Zambia, which more than 3/4 of population have experienced food shortages over the year preceding the period when they were asked. And this is 2019-21. This is post-pandemic. Now looking at the consideration of migrating, it is, as I mentioned, it is important to know that not all those who wish to migrate are actually moving, but it somehow expresses or measures the satisfaction of the situation in the countries of origin. And if the situation gets worse, or these people get a chance actually, because they are often very much constrained by financial means, they cannot plan a journey, or the journey is not always safe. We see this on TV every day. So not that everybody dares to cross the ocean. At global level, about 20% of population expresses willingness to migrate. And this is not only in developing countries. I can tell you that when the survey, for example, of Gallup World Poll demonstrated, I think I was watching it, I was checking it for 2015, even before pandemic, like figures that you are reporting for young people in Italy are comparable to many African countries. Okay, so the share of young people that would be willing to migrate.
Sona, we had Hassan Boubakri, who was explaining the very high share in Tunisia. That he was explaining that the people want to live after the political change. So
Yes.
there is because it's very high in comparison to the other country, the neighbor
Yes.
country,
And
and exactly so the political situation, the
yeah.
change in the quality of life and expectation was one of the
Yes.
reasons.
Yes. Yes, and Tunis is a special case. I will explain you now here. So if in the world we have about 20% of population willing to migrate, and actually less than 1% is preparing to do so, and even less actually does it, in Africa we have over 1/3 of population considering to move to another country. So we speak about international migration. We don't speak about internal migration. 11% plan and only 3% are preparing, applying for visa. Um, then the issue is that whether they really manage it and whether they stay in the continent or not. And considering to migrate is the highest in Cape Verde and Sierra Leone, about 60% of population, and it's lowest in Madagascar and Tanzania. Also, there are quite high figures in plan and preparation registered in Zimbabwe and Lesotho, and the lowest again in Tanzania and Madagascar. It is important to see that also the intensity of the desires. You remember we had a question about whether you want a lot, and Tunisia is an exceptional case. You see it's quite vivid, the dots that the share of those who want it a lot among those who want is very high, so that they are determined, they want a lot to migrate. As Alessandra told, it can be driven by many reasons, but one of them is perhaps young people are not satisfied by the level of changes that happened after the Arab Spring, and they are looking for a better life somewhere else because maybe they are not satisfied by the changes that happened over a period following the Arab Spring. Here, because policymakers were about migration, but whether they would be coming towards European countries. And here in the Afrobarometer, people are also asked of the potential desired destination that they would like to reach. And we group them a bit because there is Africa, North America, but also there were Australia, etc. We group them into other. We see that 1/3 of those who are willing to migrate would like to come to Europe. Okay, despite the fact that for many African countries, actually also Gulf countries are an attractive destination because, okay, that is a very different type of labor market, but many Arab-speaking, especially potential migrants, reach those destinations too. So we have about 30% of those who consider, plan, and prepare. This figure is remaining quite stable, would like to move to Europe. Okay, Europe, I mean, we don't know if Europe as a continent or European Union, but let's say roughly 1/3. Then we also, the first like kind of tabulation between the plan considering and migration across various intensity of frequency of going without food doesn't actually reveal much. We see that there is not much differences in between those groups, those who never want to migrate just a bit once and those who always want to migrate. Okay, roughly 1/3 in every case, those who consider to migrate. Okay, so there is not much explained simply looking at the degree to which they are exposed to food insecurity. So that means that in order to understand, at least to disentangle a bit the relationship between food insecurity and migration intentions, we have to opt for a more sophisticated statistical technique. And in this case, we used multivariate regression analysis and principal component analysis. I will slightly explain in the next slides. So what we did is actually we did a multinomial logic where we included, I don't know how many of you are statisticians or had a course on econometrics, but actually we try to disentangle the variation in the migration intention that is driven by food insecurity by all the other factors that are also important drivers of migration. In the model, we included the age, the usual suspect, the age, the gender, the education level, the employment labor market status, whether an individual lives in urban areas or rural areas, whether they are employed in agriculture sector, which can have a dual impact, you know, that they didn't get fertilizer, then they don't have food, but on the other hand, maybe they are less affected by the food prices, because at least they have the subsistence farming in, and they can provide themselves some food, unlike those who live in urban areas. And whether they have cash problems, so whether they had cash shortages in the past, so which somehow captures their level of income. What we see is that the results demonstrate that actually the usual suspects, individuals considering migration, are more likely to be young, they are likely to be more men than women, reside in urban areas, be active in the labor market, and this is something that there are stylized facts from coming from literature. This is not something new. Have at least primary education. There are, for example, those you can see that I don't know, maybe I need to explain how to read it. So if you want to understand the results, these are point estimates with a confidence interval. And in order to see that this variable have a statistically significant impact, it should not cross the zero line, to explain it simply, okay? If it doesn't cross the zero line, it's significant. If it is positive, it's on the right-hand side. If it is negative, on the left-hand side. For example, we see that the higher is the education, the more likely they are to migrate. The coefficient is higher. Or, for example, you can also see that being male is positively associated, being young is positively associated, living in urban areas is also positively associated. Now, going to the food related dummy variable, so the individual, it gets value 1 if individual just once or twice went without food over the year, and similarly for several times, many times, always. What we see is that those who have gone without food are positively associated with expressing willingness, considering to migrate, compared to those who didn't have the threshold is the ones that do not have any food insecurity issues. So the conclusion here is that the more you are experiencing food insecurity, the more likely you are to consider migrating. And we are capturing also food insecurity at regional level, okay, to just capture more the regional effect than the country specific dummies would do, country specific fixed effects would do. So here, this is the picture what we see. The picture changes when we go from considering to planning migration, okay? All the coefficients turned insignificant because you see they are crossing zero line, which means not only they from positive turned to negative, but they are also crossing the zero line, which means that we cannot say that they are statistically different from zero. They are zero, okay? So the effect that we captured for considering migration, the willingness to migrate, actually vanished when we speak about planning to migrate. And similarly for preparation. Actually, we also looked at different subsamples. For example, we excluded those who do not want to migrate at all and left those the samples more restricted to those who are considering migration too. The results remain quite robust. So that the effect that we see among those who consider vanishes when we move to preparation and plan and preparation. Okay, so, but what it says to us in terms of, okay, this is about preparing similarly, so you have no effect, okay, neither in planning nor in preparation. So what we saw here, that there is a positive association between relationship between food and drink migration, and more often individuals go without food, then the more likely they are considering to move abroad, the more likely it is. which is in line with the previous literature that I presented at the very beginning. But there is no significant relationship between the food insecurity and planning and preparation when we move to the more mature stage now of that migration consideration. So food insecurity does not make it more likely for people to move, and this he give us a hint that it's likely that people would have to use the resources available to them for adaptation strategies instead of funding the journey, which is also in line with the literature that was before, so that moving is just one of the adaptation strategies. Then we have case studies also later I will talk to you. But then from the point of view of policy responses, what should European Union do? Because in any case, we have countries, and as it is demonstrated both by Afrobarometer and by international organizations that are facing severe food insecurity. So what can be the response? In this sense, we have developed this principle, which aims at bringing complex set of information into more simple one. In this case, like, for example, looking at food insecurity related indicators, not the share of population going without food several times, many times, always. So you have a mixed figure when you look at each single one. So we try to pack them into a single indicator. So we try to bring a single indicator of food insecurity that would allow us to rank the countries. Similarly, the food considering migration, we would like to rank them in terms of consideration beyond the simple share of those who want to migrate. In the same way, we try to look at the planning and preparation. So I will not go into details of the how we did this statistically, because I don't know whether the audience is ready for technicalities, but you can go and check in the study itself if you are more interested, or write me back. I will give you more details on that. So we rank the countries in terms of food insecurity. We rank the countries in terms of considering migration. We rank the countries in terms of plan and preparation in order to shape the policy responses that European Union should have in mind, trying to help these countries to overcome the food insecurity. And here we have the countries scattered in terms of considering migration and food insecurity, ranking them from 0 to 1. Closer to 1 are the countries that are more food insecure, okay, or more considering to migration. And here we have 4 group of countries, because we have median dividing this group in 4. On the left, on the closer to the 0, you have countries that are low in food insecurity, and they are quite low in considering to migrate. So in opposition to this, we have countries which are both highly food insecure, they rank quite high in terms of food insecurity, and those who are quite high in considering migration. So both are very high. And this here, and then we have countries which are high in food insecurity but not in considering migration. So, for example, Madagascar or Niger. So here, most probably, we deal with a trapped population, food insecurity coupled with inability to move. Okay, and similarly, also in terms of preparation. Okay, so we have countries. Two distinct groups which are low in both and high in both.
But
And
Sona, sorry, how you explain this different reaction to food insecurity by country? Because they have different population, age group, other possibility,
yeah,
or because they are far from destination?
Yeah, it might be that they are too far from countries with better opportunities. Okay, in any case, it can be that there is a better response from the government, though I don't believe so. Or maybe this is a chronic problem, so people, it's not something new. They're over all their life, they are living in this very poor condition, so they don't even consider any change. You know, this kind of a trapped population. Okay.
Yes, I understand. Like Benin is a very poor country.
Yeah.
I don't know
So
the
they cannot
other,
even
Togo, I
afford
don't know
the journey.
nothing.
they cannot even afford the journey, because we know that journey, not the poorest ones are migrating, no?
Yeah,
We knew
exactly.
in
The
migration
poverty
before.
trap, the
Yeah,
poverty
the
trap
poverty
that we
trap.
always
So these are
mention.
trapped population. So if we group those, that we have like these four group of countries, which are, for example, the lowest one, lower level of intention to migrate, with higher level of food insecurity, like Eswatini, Madagascar, Malawi. Okay, so so this we know that in Madagascar the food insecurity even got worse, and there are also some political apparently concerns that are aggravating this crisis. But let's say that if we are policymakers, for example, you put yourself in shoes of policymakers, most probably the response to those that are in Guinea, Gabon, and Togo is to try to create and to prevent the departures, to make sure that they know about the threats that are on their journey, while those who are in Eswatini and Madagascar most likely also that need really a humanitarian response, because they don't have other even strategies to cope with. Okay. Just wanted to say that we also looked at the past in the three major famine that happened in the continent, in Nigeria, Somalia, and Ethiopia, and we didn't. I mean, I will not have time to go into details, but just to tell that the picture is different, even in different periods of time within the same countries, and there are differences across poor and richer households, and there are differences also depending on the duration of this famine, and also the resources available from abroad. For example, in Ethiopia, many could count on the resources that were coming from abroad. Okay, and in some cases, this migration was an opportunity to help those who remain beyond to survive the hard time. Some families look for an employment opportunities elsewhere, especially in Nigeria and Ethiopia. Also, I mean, this crisis do not come alone. It's not usually only the food insecurity, and it's not only the climate-related negative adverse conditions, but it aggravates also the conflict in the region, because for the limited resources there is more tensions, etc., etc. We have also studies that prove that the food insecurity and climate change also kind of triggers already dormant conflicts in the region. For example, in Sudan, especially, I remember we have found some evidence.
Yes,
which
but
means
Sona, Nigeria fundamentally is a very rich country. They have
yes,
all.
you see that there are
So,
the problem there is not because of no resources, but also because of the distribution of those
the
resources.
management of the
Yeah,
resource.
yeah. See, there is no common trend, because also the cases are very different, and within the same country, like in Nigeria, you have a huge population. Some we know that are quite well, but the misery of a large part of population is not leaving the country out of the picture. Let's say it's a matter of resource management and response and inequalities. While, for example, in Ethiopia, in addition to war, or in Somalia, there were severe droughts in the country. Okay. Overall, I would like to before concluding, I would like to say that it is very like kind of it's not, there is no shortcut, there is no clear relationship between food insecurity and international migration. And here we speak about international migration, with what the European policymakers, our colleagues, were concerned about. Going without food makes people more likely to want, but less likely to plan and prepare to migrate. And that food insecurity does not automatically lead to mass migration. People look for an opportunities in proximity. There are also differences by depending on the type of households, and also the area they live in, the way the rural areas and urban areas are responding. For example, richer household might adopt different technologies and different types of seeds which are more drought resistant, for example. And I think in this respect, many international organizations do their best to respond to this. And it is important especially to keep in mind those who will not be able to migrate, because the response of policymakers most probably need to look to the ways to go beyond the short-term war-created, the Russia's war-created pressure, and to look at the trapped population in the areas, because migration, because the food insecurity in the region was not only due to war, but it was a growing problem from before, and it will stay there because the climate change, environmental condition deterioration, we know already for sure, in Africa will bring to more desperation and more population that is exposed to both high temperature and declining food insecurity, declining crops. And the most important thing here is that it is very kind of alarming that areas that will be most affected by climate change are also those that have highest fertility. So it means that growing poor population in the areas. So with this, I would like to conclude. Alessandra, I would have maybe some time for one question, two questions. I have 5 minutes.
Yes, there is a student. Please come here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sona. Yes, please, come here.
Thank you very much for interesting seminar. I have just technical question. Where can we find presentation and record?
I will send. This I will.
Okay, that's all I wanted to ask. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
You
presentation
find
you
on
will
Moodle
find.
as for the other.
Yeah, I will also share the study itself, so you can go to the study, and the data is public. So you can take the data and play by
As
yourself.
for the other, there is the references in the readings, there is the link of the publication. Yes, sure, everything. No, I think, Sona, it's very important what you said, because in a certain way, when we speak about the driver of migration, we always stop on the research in the past. So the Ukrainian war is a shock for Europe, for the inflow of asylum seeker and so on, for the future of international relations, for the trade of European country, United States, and so on. And Africa remain far away, remain their own scenario, because they're so far. And so the link, for instance, I didn't know that Russia is producing the fertilizer that is used in Africa. And this will be also a challenge for new technological agriculture, which use less water, because this is a shock. The war in Ukraine, the Ukrainian war is a shock for the environmental, the agricultural environment, but is a shock in a long trend decline of water, of the environment, and so on. And so this will be a push for an increase in new technology, in agriculture, new technology. And this will also recreate the relationship between countries, between countries in Africa also.
Yeah, actually, this also gives a food for thought, because as you see, it's climate change is not affecting one country. We see, I mean, sitting in Italy, we see a long drought that Italy faces. I have never seen. I'm living in the most humid place in Italy, in Varese, and we haven't seen rain almost since last year. We need another 50 rainy days to bring the lake to the level that it was. So imagine now we have all the technologies, maybe all the resources to put there. However, the African countries need the help, the know-how, how to deal with that. And this brings us to a common problem that needs an international cooperation, not only between the European countries, but with African countries. If we want them not to depart from their origin countries, then we need to bring them the technology and to work together to to understand with the androgen consequences of the climate change and a problem that is apparently common to everybody living in this big house called planet.
Yes, and common to all the country is the good governance. Because
Yes,
in
yes.
Africa and in Europe, but in Africa more than in other countries, we have the proper good governance, good politician, and education is the solution to improve probably the quality of the politician, to have a citizenship which is able to understand and to organize, to maximize.
Yeah, nobody is left behind. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I would like to thank you, Alessandra, for this opportunity. Thank you very much. I have another meeting to follow, and everybody who has a question, feel free to write it because my contacts are in the presentation. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sona. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.